Hi, my name is Alexis Stark, and I'm the Director of Special Services with Grandview C4 Schools. I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss with you how to read and understand IEPs and 504s, two very important documents that you may find attached to students in your classroom. First, let's look over Individualized Educational Programs, or IEPs. I've used a sample IEP with no information in it to really help us guide and learn and look at what a real IEP looks like. While sitting in an IEP meeting, parents are often asked to confirm the demographic information. You can actually see the people who have been invited to the meeting and how they plan on attending. Just breaking down the pieces here, parent or guardian, student will normally be invited once they are old enough. LEA representative, that's generally your building principal, special education teacher, regular classroom teacher, individual interpreting instructional implications of evaluation results. This is often your process coordinator or a member of the diagnostic team. The present level of academic achievement and functional performance is an opportunity during the IEP meeting for you to share your thoughts of how a student is doing, particularly during the area of strengths for the child, as well as changes in current functioning. This is where you, as a classroom teacher, have the chance to share with the parent how you feel the student is doing and how you're supporting them in their educational environment when they're with you. Special considerations. This is where we'll go over if the child has any special considerations, like if they're visually impaired, hearing impaired. This also includes if the student is also qualified for ELL, whether the student has communication needs or is eligible for ESY. The next section is annual measurable goals. As a general education teacher, you may not even be aware of these goals in your classroom. However, you are an important piece. Annual goals are written to line up with our current curriculum benchmarks and standards and indicators. We have to decide how they will be tracked, work samples, scoring guides, curriculum-based tests. These are all things that might be requested from you by the special education teacher to help with the data collection. A student can have more than one goal. Students can have generally 3 or 4 goals, but you might see students that have a lot of related services that may end up with even more. Reporting progress and services summary. The reporting progress generally is done on a semester basis. The service summary is more interesting when it comes to students that are co-taught. For example, services may include special education settings where the child is in a pull-out class with other special education peers. The number of minutes is determined based on the student's need. Related services includes speech, language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Transportation is not normally something a general education teacher needs to worry about. However, if you are planning a field trip off campus for your students, you will need to coordinate with your special education teacher to make sure that that child's needs are met should they have any related to transportation. Regular education participation. When you're looking at this from a K-12 standpoint, this is how much time the student is spending away from their non-disabled peers. So this would not include co-teaching. Placement considerations and decisions. So everything is based on a continuum inside regular class at least 80% of the time, all the way to a private separate school. Let's look at some different grade level assessments and assessment accommodations. So MAP for grades 3 through 8, you'll see there's a list of universal tools. Those are available to all students regardless of whether or not they have an IEP or 504. However, they should be regularly used within the classroom. There's also accommodations, and these are decided on by the IEP team. One key thing to keep in mind is that if you are suggesting a student use accommodations during the MAP, MAP or EOC, then they should be using these accommodations regularly within their general education classrooms or on a regular basis within wherever they are testing. And there's also options for district-wide assessment accommodations. The next part is the big one: classroom accommodations and modifications. I'd like to pause and take a moment to suggest that you please scan the QR code, which will take you directly to the Curriculum and Instruction website, which has a link to a really thorough description of what each of the accommodations and modifications could look like in your classroom. Again, the best source of information regarding modifications and accommodations is the student special education teacher. However, this also gives you a good place to jump off from and also gives you some good ideas about what this might look like in your classroom. Things to ask as a teacher participating in an IEP during the special education process covering accommodations and modifications is really more details about what the special education teacher and the parents think this should look like in your classroom. For example, a big one is preferential seating. What does that actually look like and mean for this specific student? The last big thing to cover is Form G, the distance learning plan. This is used in the case the schools close or we're using an AMI day. It supports the student and parent in understanding what will be provided to that student should this occur. As a general education teacher, you are part of this conversation to make sure it is something that meets your needs, the needs of the student, and the needs of the special education teacher to ensure academic progress continues. Again, just like an IEP, the first whole chunk is really just student demographic information. It then goes in to list or describe the student's mental or physical impairment that serve as the basis for the student's 504 disability. You also need to identify major life activities or major bodily functions that have been impacted by that student's disability. Provision of FAPE. Again, the big key here is mitigating measures. Even though a student may be on medication for their ADHD, they could still qualify for a 504 plan because you have to put yourself in the mindset of, would this student need assistance if they weren't on medication? Just like with an IEP, you need to evaluate what additional programs, aids, services, supports, interventions, accommodations might be necessary for the student to receive a free and appropriate public education. So, first, you want to identify the student need, and it should link to one of the major life activities that's impacted. Describe the services that will be provided, where those services will be provided, who is responsible, when it will be implemented, and the evaluation criteria that was used to determine the need. Hopefully, going through the different parts of a 504 and an IEP has helped your understanding of these two very important and legally binding documents that your students may have. If you need support implementing a 504, please talk with your counselor. If you need help implementing an IEP, please talk with your building process coordinator or special education teacher. Throughout the year, you'll be invited to attend these different types of meetings, and we hope that you'll provide input regarding what the student is like in your classroom. Just remember, you're the expert of their behavior when they're with you. Embrace your expertise and feel confident in sharing your knowledge about that student during the meeting.